subject for today is scaling, the transition from growth to profitability. First of all, it's a great privilege to be here at Kerala Startup Mission, incredibly well-organized event. I've been here from yesterday, met a lot of very bright people. Now, this event is probably full of startups. Most of them seem to be early-stage startups. What we are going to talk about today is probably not top of mind for early-stage startups, but it's really worth discussing this. Growth is one thing that every startup aspires for, no matter what stage of life you are in. But scaling becomes a real thing, particularly as you start getting some success. People interchangeably use the term growth and scaling. Scaling actually means the process of growing your revenues faster than your costs. If you end up scaling or cracking the formula for scaling, you'll build a profitable business. And a profitable business means you can plow your capital back into building the business and not be reliant on external capital. It's not a bad thing to be reliant on external capital in the early stages, but that's what we are going to talk about. The panel here are an incredible group of scalers in their own field. I'll make quick introductions and then we'll jump into the questions. On my left is Suhas, very interesting person. He's probably India's youngest founder. Started his company at the age of 14, did you, Suhas? Obviously didn't have access to capital at the age of 14. No one wants to lend you. So he's had to figure out scaling all by himself, bootstrapped his business. It's a cybersecurity and a cyber defense business that's across 6 or 7 countries now. So that's Suhas. On Kent, he's, of course, from MUFG, Mitsubishi Financial Group, venture capitalist, runs a $300 million fund that's dedicated to India. He has obviously got a bird's eye view of B2C companies, B2B companies, all kinds of entrepreneurs who are scaling. And then we've got Mikhil. You're the CEO of India's digital FPC. And before that, you were building Hotstar and PharmEasy. So you've got a fair amount of experience building both high-growth businesses. And now as a public company CEO, scaling obviously becomes very important. Let me start with Ken first, the investment banker in the group. Ken, as you look at your portfolio of companies, what are you seeing? What are you seeing founders, what are you telling founders about this transition from growth to profitability?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm Ken from the MUFG Bank, and we have 300 million investment fund for India, and we have 7 portfolios so far. And let's say half of 7 is profitable after break even. So it's typical from the before after break even stage fund. And having said that, I just want to share some example which happened yesterday actually. And we have some enterprise SaaS company, and board and the founders have a huge discussion about some business, and that is about the discussion about of course they have to acquire new customers by bidding process, and pricing matters, and founders rejected one business opportunity because that is just break even profitability. I mean, to be precise, they are talking about some bips, 5 bips, 10 bips, and the board is pushed for the growth, more GMV, more revenue. But the founders decided to protect profitability. So I just want to say, even the middle stage company are always discussing this single bips difference between the profitability and growth. So that is for matters for everyone. And I spent yesterday here, and I met some entrepreneurs, especially for the pre-revenue seed stage entrepreneurs. So I just want to say something for the entrepreneurs mainly. And I know you have to focus on the revenue first, and profitability comes later. But if you aim IPO exit, profitability of course matters someday. And I just want to recommend, before you start business, please do some homework, research. This is because, some products, some business model cannot make enough revenues, returns for the investors. So you can do some, comps analysis, sector analysis, and you can find, the market product which can create bigger margins, profitability in the future. So before start your business, and please do some research and find the juicy, profitable segment, so that you can start from the growth, but then you can turn into the profitability, and make balance between that.
Excellent advice. Suhas, moving on to you, you've had a slightly different journey. You've bootstrapped your business, you've been on a journey, you're now a relatively scaled up business. What are the skills and capabilities that you need to be a profitable business?
Yeah, I mean, I firstly want to thank the Startup Mission and the IT Secretary's Office for inviting me here, and I'm absolutely impressed by the fire in the belly that's there across Huddle. So to start with, I started my company because actually my father did not buy me a computer, and I wanted to be in that elite circle of my friends who had access to computers. So I went to a cyber cafe, and I had a barter deal with the cyber cafe owner that when he goes for his lunch, I would like to man his shop so that in exchange I could learn, I could use the internet and start building websites. And then from a freelancer, I've transitioned to building a company. And the fact that I hail from a middle class family and as a first generation entrepreneur, where entrepreneurship was considered as a sin, in fact, the only way for me was profits. And I had to book revenues. So of course, while I applaud and appreciate when startups do actually celebrate fundraising, but I think as my wife was actually telling me the other day that when startups only keep celebrating fundraising, it's like the chef celebrating when he goes and buys ingredients, and you should also cook the pudding. So it's extremely important that as business, it has to make profits, it has to make revenue. And I think the fact that I started very young, and especially when investors and bankers had a prejudice to invest in us, I think the only way for us to scale was to book revenues and to manage the cash really well. So as a company, we are extremely proud because yeah, I mean, we've been a cash-rich company, we've been profitable, and at the same time, I think it's like walking across a tightrope. And when you're only driving profits, I feel you may not, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you may not take as much as those risks which a heavily funded product company is willing to take the risk. It could be in building new products or to expanding into new markets, because if a key factor for you is the bottom line there. So yeah.
So how do you, I mean, just to follow up on that, how do you balance growth and profitability? Like you said, you can't press the pedal too hard on profitability and just harvest, because then you're kind of losing out on the long-term potential. So how do you balance that? What kind of culture do you create in the company?
Yeah. So I think first start, I mean, for any tech company, the biggest cost component is people cost. And as a company, as one of the policies, we're extremely cautious about the people that we bring in. And at the same time, if we wouldn't do aggressive hiring or we don't do like impromptu hiring, we want to make sure that, in fact, if this person is joining the company, in fact, we want to be doubly sure. And we make sure that every member of the company, apart from the shared resources, is associated with the project and is associated with the revenue, so that it's extremely important that you do not have, I mean, as a company, as a mid-sized company, you cannot afford to have employees on the bench. And of course, for contingencies, you can have some people cost for the bench, but the people cost has to be managed really, really well. And expansion into markets. I've done these mistakes where, in fact, we've done impulse expansions, let's say to France or to Europe, because we felt that there's an opportunity, and then we started to realize that and some of the European companies had prejudice to work with Indian companies, or it was extremely difficult for us to operate in these markets without having the local talent. So I would say that we've, of course, burnt our hands in those markets. So it's exactly why I would want to emphasize that in our expansion mode, we've always done joint ventures, like for example with Airbus Cybersecurity in France, or in across Bahrain, we have partnered with Bayon, uh, which is a state-owned tech company. So when we enter new markets, we look at joint ventures so that we mitigate those risks, and the partner picks up those risks. And of course, eventually we would, after you've signed up some marquee customers, or as we call some lighthouse customers, then we start expanding those markets on our own.
So careful GTM planning and some innovation there. Mikhil, over to you. You're a public company CEO. Obviously, profitability is important for you because the street holds you accountable. But you've also been growing fast-growing companies before that. What's the difference? What do you experience the difference to be from a process, people, culture, through all of those lenses?
All right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. But personally, I think, firstly, they're two very, very different businesses, right? When I think about the first business where I was the co-founder at PharmEasy, I think when you have to build a business, something like that, right? It has to be, you're creating a market, right? So when you're creating a market, by default, I don't think there's a day zero profitable way to do it. When you're inventing a market or creating a market, I think there is no other option but to burn in the start, right? But when I look at Apollo, right, which is a digital lending company, I think my philosophy when it comes to financial services is that you can't basically be in financial services and be basically like a cash burn business, right? You can't be in the business of lending and essentially call it a GMB business. They're two very, very separate businesses. So I think from my perspective at least, I don't think too much about whether one company is listed or one company is unlisted. I think at the same point in time, both companies, you have investors and you have to be mindful of their capital, right? I think in the end of the day, both companies have to basically deliver, like I really believe in lifetime ROE, right? That's the North Star in the end of the day. I think maybe sometimes what happens is it's easier when you're running a private company to convince 5-6 people in a room versus sometimes, when you're running obviously a company like Apollo, which is listed and we have like 10,000 shareholders, I think it may be difficult to sometimes get a message across. But for me personally, the way we run Apollo Finvest is the same way I would run a PharmEasy as an example, where my thought process isn't to manage quarter on quarter. Personally, I don't even look at my quarter numbers because the direction is more important than small milestones, right? Like that's not it. I think I've seen a lot of public companies to know enough that sometimes there are founders and CEOs etc. who kind of manage quarter to quarter because their CXOs bonuses depends on it. I don't think like that. Even in Apollo, I have like majority stake. We have like 70% stake in the company. So to me, I'm the biggest shareholder in the company. So to me, like the biggest sign that I want to kind of manage is that is the direction right? Is the company going to be 100x more valuable, 10x 10 year down the line? As long as that direction is set, I think that's more the focus at all points in time. The reason why we are profitable since probably year one at Apollo versus the fact we were not profitable from year one at PharmEasy is just because they're two very, very wildly different businesses. Right? That's what it is.
Yeah, so I think you said it well. You have to build value over the lifetime of the business. That's obviously a very significant optimizing function. But at the same time, you can't afford to run out of money. And that's kind of the balance. Now, the one thing that I've seen, and you probably agree, is the climate for fundraising has changed quite significantly, at least in the last 2 years or so. I mean, pre-2022, everything was going up. Raising capital was relatively easy. But the end of the ZERP policy, so to speak, fundraising's been hard. How much of what we are discussing today is driven by the reality that raising capital is not as easy as it used to be across the board. I mean, maybe there's a few AI companies that are raising capital at insane rates, but generally it's tougher.
Yeah, I think, very honestly, I think 100% is driven by capital markets, to be very honest, right? I think any entrepreneur who's saying that they themselves decided to become profitable is lying. So the reality is, I think, the end result of all of this will be, like for me as an example, I've been building companies since 2010. So I see these as cycles. If you ask me personally, if you study the history of the internet, right? Reality is the cycle that we saw before this, the ZERP era or 0% interest era, is an abnormality, right? That's not reality, essentially, right? Like that was abnormal. This is normal. Like that's how I think about it, right? So in the end of the day, I don't think it's to do with founder maturity. Of course, this will make founders mature. But the decision to become profitable wasn't really driven by, some internal voice saying like, let's become profitable. I think it was driven by the fact that suddenly investors said that, okay, you guys need to find another, another source of capital. And when there are no other sources of capital because your business shows no sign of basically delivering a lifetime ROE, then nobody's going to invest, basically, right? And I think it's also to do with different levels of maturity of your business, right? See, I think what investors, and I think that's every phase of life, right? What anybody wants to see is signal, right? You can't basically say that you're, building a business for 7 to 10 years and show no sign that you're going to be basically one day wildly profitable. That's what all investors basically want. They'll have all the patience in the world, right? But if you show 4, 5, 7 years, 8 years down the line that there is no hope, basically, right? And you're wildly unprofitable and you're yet, running the same old tactics, which is basically, giving crazy discounts, having massive teams, and calling yourself a tech company, right? To me, that's the biggest sin. Basically, if you can have and whatever companies we study, at least from a fintech perspective, I can tell you the largest sin they commit is not marketing. It's not, that they don't know how to underwrite. I think their teams are massive, right? And that's just not what a tech company is for. If you have like 500 people in your tech team, you better be building the next Windows or, Mac OS, right? That's how I think. So all of those insights combined, I think reality is that it's a forcing function, which has come from investors. And second, it also depends on how, late stage your company is, right? If you're asking to be profitable within the first 2 years, depending again on what kind of business you're building, maybe it's too early. But if it's 5, 6 years, I think you need to start giving the right signals to your investors that this business is real. And that's when they decide, do they want to double down on you? Otherwise, their competition is fierce, right? Like entrepreneurship is a game where it's the ultimate game of basically competition, right? There are, if I'm an investor with money, I have so many people to invest in. So if you're not shaping up, I'll invest on my next best bet.
No, I agree with that. A follow-on question for the panel, like not just for you, I don't want to pile on you, but you mentioned two things. One is you alluded to lean teams, and that's very true. In tech, it's all about how do you get more from a core group of people without necessarily needing to add engineers or salespeople or all kinds of people all the time. How do you build lean teams? That's like an operator question for both Suhas and you, Mikhil. And this second part of it is also, outside of the lean team, what kind of business model or what kind of experimentation? You talked about signals. What kind of experiments do you run that build confidence both within the team and also in your investor team that you're in the right direction? Sometimes you spend money and you're not going to be able to show revenue for it immediately. So what you spend today is going to turn into revenue probably 2 quarters down. Depends on the sales cycle of the business, of course. But how do you run those experiments? How do you kind of glean leading indicators? And how do you build confidence in the team, both the operating team and the investment team? Anyone who wants to take it first.
So I think most important, I think the advantage of building tech companies, obviously, as you told, we've got classic examples, be it WhatsApp, and we've got many tech companies where I think the max headcount that they had was maybe it was 20, 25 employees, and of course they were sold for billions of dollars. Uh, I think the best part of these companies is that, of course, the value that they've created, and the value which their acquirers or investors manage to perceive. So I think uh, the biggest advantage for product companies is that you could exponentially scale, and you are able to build the value, and you could exit quickly. But I think for a company like ours, which is solution driven company, which is into services, and it is people driven company. So it's exactly where it's very difficult for us to stay very lean as well. So but as a solutions company, of course, the one thing that we managed to crack that is we build a massive partner ecosystems within India or outside of India, and we enable our partners to implement our products. So for example, in India, we partnered with Bharat Electronics Limited, which is a defense PSU, so that of course, as a company, we do not have to do the heavy lifting of actually selling to Indian defense or to the Indian government. So actually, we could delegate it to them, and as a company, I recognize my strengths, which is to build products, and which is in cyber security. So I think we could stay hyper focused, and it's coming to your earlier question as well, that when you need to scale, or when you need to bring in revenues as well, you need to gamble with investing into sales teams or into marketing teams. I think if there are entrepreneurs in the room who are into B2B or B2G, I think if they could sign up good partners, and if they're able to build a partner ecosystem for their products, I think it's absolutely good way for them to scale. And obviously, when you've built enough revenue and of profits, obviously you could scale organically. But I think in the initial days, it's always good for these startups, which is in SaaS or B2B, to have a partner ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would think about it is, I'd break it up into two parts, right? One is, I think experimentation is fine, but I think before you experiment, right, step number one should be to be world class at one thing, right? Pick one narrow thing, go narrow and deep, right? Basically, be world class at one thing, be known for one thing. I think most people make a mistake of going wide, basically, and being too shallow, right? So when you build a product like that, you end up having no, I would say, hardcore fans, right? You should have customers which absolutely love one thing about you. Then they'll be open to even trying some other product because you've earned their trust. Now, second is, when it comes to experiments, I think there are two things, right? Number one is, I think most entrepreneurs, I think probably in the world, right, have an allergic reaction to selling, right? Because selling is so hard, right? Selling is basically going out there and getting like 99 rejections probably and getting one acceptance. That sucks, right? What you actually want to do is be in a room full of your friends or like people that you really like working with and build cool stuff and pat yourself on the back, because that's the easy thing to do. And that's why, like, especially considering the tech field where most entrepreneurs are engineers, myself included, we love building, right? We love building cool stuff. We love building stuff with AI, but we never think about, like, is there a customer for this? Or is somebody going to pay any money for this, right? Because it's just fun sitting in a garage and working and building something which you think is cool. So I think what everybody should do as a mantra is build less and sell more, right? However, ironic it sounds in a world where everybody says, no, build, and it doesn't work like that, right? Build and they will come, it doesn't work. You have to get them there, you have to get the customers there, and then you can build. Because I think in today's world, with the talent we have, especially in India, I think building is easy, right? And point number two, I would say, is when you're building, build it like with, simple, basic first principles, which is, lean startup, right? Like, I think everybody should read that book. It's a very simple concept where when you're building something, it's not like you have to, I think people have a syndrome that, when you launch some product, you think you're Apple, right? Like, basically the product should be absolutely finished and, beautiful, and there's going to be a launch party where, when you launch something, you're going to have millions of customers. Rarely does that happen. I think the idea should be to build something, just bare minimum, right? And probably, very honestly, if I have to be bluntly honest, I encourage entrepreneurs to even lie, right? Just put out a product and lie saying these features are there. See if there is any interest, right? Just get customers to be like, wow, that's cool, I'll sign up for it. And then once you have enough people signed up, get your engineering team to pull like crazy nights over 1 to 3 weeks and get everything that you promised to them, right? Don't sell them something which you're not going to be building. But in the start, don't build everything, then pray to God that they come, because most likely most assumptions are wrong unless they are tested. And you don't want to be in a situation where you burn through so much money, build 100 features, and because mostly customers just want 1, 2 or 3 features, right? That's the reality. So that's at least how I think about experimentation.
Okay, so a couple of interesting things. You said focus on a narrow scope, try to get it right, so deep instead of wide. Fake it until you make it. Nothing wrong in it. And something interesting you said, and I'll come to you, Ken. You also said services businesses have a slightly different scaling formula, which makes sense from, let's say, product-first businesses. Because and I think you alluded to go-to-market, even innovation, looking at a partner ecosystem instead of building your own sales force all the way through.
I mean, at least that can help you to onboard this, at least marquee or this lighthouse customers. But I would want to counter to one point Mikhil told, because I know that I know that my team is live streaming this to my office, and I do not want my sales guys to hear exactly what you told, because if there are features that doesn't exist, and I do not want to consent to them to sell something, because I have to firefight the conversation between the delivery and the sales. But I think I've actually done that, where we've exaggerated a product which did not have the features. But when you need to do a POC or when you need to deliver it, and if you're not able to deliver on time, I think that's actually backfires, and that actually hurts the brand reputation. So I'm not sure if that may work for B2C, because I've seen B2C startups having, or even SaaS startups having this waiting list and actually building that FOMO kind of like approach by having the waitlisting forms. But I'm still not sure if I should buy to the fact that if there are no features, then do we allow our sales guys to sell that, and if it backfires the company's brand reputation, in case if your engineering cannot deliver it on time?
No, of course, I think you got to be very smart, right? You got to be talking about features to them which you can deliver, right? Like, I mean, I'm talking about experimentation specifically, not your flagship product. I think if you're doing that with your flagship product, you don't want your engineering team to go crazy, messing with your, I would say, star product, right? This is something which you're experimenting with, and probably which is, something which, this is what you do to test whether your thesis or what you're building, is there a market? Is there somebody who's ready to pay for this? If the answer is yes, right? Usually, at least what I've seen, by the time the guy agrees to use your product, he signs your agreement, it goes through legal, he does your integration, it takes like 1-2 months right there, right? And when you start seeing strong signals that this guy is actually going to pay for something, you can basically talk about the products which can come like 1 or 2 months down the line, and you build it today, right? The minute you get the signal, your engineering team has to start going on a rampage to build that stuff out. And because it's not your star product, it's a new launch essentially. I think by default, I think you'll end up attracting customers as well, who, if they're okay with a new product, they'll probably be, I would say, mid to low scale customers, right? I don't think you're going to get a HUL to sign up for a product which didn't exist 2 months ago, right? They'll probably come in the end. So I think it's all about, like, if you think in the real world, what are the kind of customers which end up using new products? It's always the guys who are okay with, a little bit of bugs here and there, but they want to be made up for it in terms of price, in terms of service, in terms of all of those things. So I think it's a nuanced way of doing it. I think all of these things combined may work. You have something to add?
Ken.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just want to add one thing. And I met some entrepreneurs yesterday, and many of them, of course, I know everyone. Entrepreneurs want to make a difference, but I just want to add something that is, whose pain are you solving? Some wants to solve pains of individual, but some people wants to solve social problem, and you have to clarify who is paying for your product. And for example, I live in Bombay, and the air quality is not great in these days. And if you can solve air quality in your room, maybe I'm happy to pay. It's air purifier in my condos. But if you say, oh, I want to solve entire air pollution, that is great, but I'm skeptical who is paying. So don't mix personal pain and social pain. And who is paying? Who is willing to pay the margins? So I just want to clarify this too. Who's paying? I solving. Especially I don't deny social entrepreneurs, but my view is I mean, how can I say? Social impact cannot create business. However, business can create social impact. So please don't confuse that.
Thank you very much, panel. You've been incredible for sharing your journey. For anyone who wants to speak to the panel, they're hanging around here. I think Suhas and Mikhil are leaving later tonight, but they're here for a couple of hours. Ken is a man in demand. There's a lot of people who wants to pitch to him. So please find the time and get hold of them, and I'm sure they're going to be helpful. Thank you very much.